I need to build a lifestyle where the doing what matters is first. That's the first priority. And then money and the business and this real estate investing thing serves that. It's the servant. It's not in charge. And I think a lot of us, myself included, get that backwards sometimes. We live to work instead of working to live.
Welcome to the House Hacking Success Podcast, where you'll learn the path to free rent and financial freedom through real estate. Featuring your hosts, Brad Labrie and Drew Klingler.
What's up, everybody? It's your host, Bradley Labrie, and today I want to talk about the podcast sponsor, Rentometer. Whether you already have an established rental business or analyzing your first rental deal, you know that getting the rent right is crucial to lowering investment risk and optimizing your rental income. That's why the go-to source for rent data is Rentometer. Property investors and property managers rely on Rentometer because it is the fastest and easiest way to access quality rent data for addresses and neighborhoods anywhere in the United States. You can also research current local comps, trends, and property data. Don't take our word for it. Rentometer analyzes over 500,000 rents per month and gets rave reviews from customers. My property manager, myself, and my clients all use Rentometer anytime we are looking to purchase a new property to know exactly what we can get for our properties. Go to rentometer.com today to get your 7-day free trial and save up to 60%. Grow your rental business smarter with Rentometer.
What's up, everybody? Real quick before we start the show, if you go down to the description or the show notes for this podcast episode, there's a link, and that's going to send you to a page that you can download our free ebook on. This ebook is really good. Brad wrote it, and it covers everything that you need to know about house hacking in a very structured order so you can put all the pieces together. All right, enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? I am so excited for today's episode with Chad Carson from BiggerPockets. He was on episode 39, but he is the best-selling author of Retire Early with Real Estate, produced by BiggerPockets, and he has an upcoming course that we're going to talk about. I went through it several years ago. It radically changed my investing career. He's a dear friend of mine, but we also talked a lot about just his journey, his mantra of doing what matters most, that real estate is about something bigger than just real estate. It's about doing what matters in your own personal life. We were all set here to do something. So we talk a lot about that, the FI and FIRE community. He's a big advocate of it. So we talk about the whole concept, what that looks like. We talk about the importance of relationships. We talk about his portfolio and all of that. I really, truly hope you enjoy this podcast. Chad is just an incredible member of this community, and we hope to continue to promote what he's doing. And we hope that some of you join us in the course. Like I said, I will be a part of it. I'll be a teacher's assistant. So I will be there helping everyone in the house hacking community, but just learn real estate in general. I always learn something from him. So again, I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to House Hacking Success. Today we have Chad Carson from BiggerPockets. Thank you for coming on, Chad.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you. It's also always awesome to talk to you, Bradley.
For sure. So we had you on episode 39, and we talked a lot about your story, starting out at house hacking and what you've done today. But today we're going to kind of go into kind of my story of finding you, the upcoming course that you have going. But really, what we're going to focus this whole podcast around is becoming a deal maker. And you and I talked a little bit about it before, and then before we got on here, just about the challenges that this market present, and that being adaptable and adapting to what happens in the market or what happens, the exterior forces like coronavirus and things like that. And also just becoming a deal maker within your market. So I genuinely appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's great. Getting to talk real estate is always fun with you.
So for those that maybe didn't listen to episode 39, again, go back and briefly discuss kind of your career in real estate.
Yeah, so I got started right after college. So I was a biology major in college. I was a science major, but I always had an interest in business and entrepreneurship. And I honestly thought it was just going to be a year or two. I was going to take a break and then go back in the real world and like get a real job. But I started finding deals for other people. And luckily, I graduated from college without any debt because I played football. So I know you're an athlete as well.
Yeah.
But that was a big benefit to me. I didn't realize how important now that I see how many people have student debt and having to overcome that. But that sort of gave me a little bit of tailwind that I could just go out there and become an entrepreneur. And once I started it, I started just loving the business. I love the freedom of being an entrepreneur, not having to go work at a job and sit at a desk with somebody else. And so I never looked back. And really, my real estate career has been the beginning was just being a person flipping houses, finding deals, getting them under contract, sometimes selling them to other investors who would buy them for cash, like as a wholesaler. That was a wholesale business. But eventually I realized that margins were better if I could figure out how to get the money and buy the deals myself, at least in part. And so a business partner and I have been working together for 18 years. We flipped houses a lot. And then eventually we also realized that, hey, if we want to get out of the job of flipping houses all the time, we need to own some assets permanently that produce income on a monthly basis. And that's the beautiful thing about real estate. You can make it a business, a career, a real estate agent like you are. You can do it actively, flipping houses, or you can do it a little bit more passively as a landlord. And so that's what we transitioned to. And that's, fast forward, my business partner and I have about 110 units, and we're in Clemson, South Carolina. Most of my time is not spent on the real estate business, although that's my main income source. I have property managers managing most of those. We still do some deals here and there, and we're loaning some money, but I'm less of a deal maker going in and buying the deals and negotiating myself. I'm more behind the scenes now, loaning money, consulting, helping other people do it, and having the deals come to me at this point.
For sure. And briefly describe kind of that first house hack. It was a four-plex, if I remember correctly, and I think it even had Merry Christmas or something like that on above the doors. Briefly describe that experience going into your first house hack. Yeah, so I was out there flipping houses, and I was living in my business partner's spare bedroom. He had this room with a bunch of boxes in it, and I was like, "Is there a bed in there?" When I first started, I just camped out in his house. But eventually, that was not a functional way to live. And can't get a girlfriend and do that kind of thing. Live in somebody's house. But I was like, I got to get a place to live, and houses were kind of expensive for me to make a payment on as an entrepreneur. So I dabbled in that a little bit, but I eventually realized that is just kind of natural, like just studying other investors who had done this for years, that they would move into one unit, rent out the other units, or move into a house and rent out the spare bedrooms. And we now call that house hacking. And I know you do such a great job of teaching that to people. And for me, it was like, I've got to pay the bills, and I don't have a lot of money. My money was coming in, some money this month, no money for 3 months. And so it was just a way to stabilize my life as an investor, as an entrepreneur. And I found this deal through a referral from another person. It was a bank-owned property. There was a local savings and loan that had taken the property back. And it's just one of those deals. If you're out driving for dollars or walking around the neighborhood, it's the one that's vacant, that there's all the other ones are full. And you're like, why is that property vacant? And that's how he noticed it and called me about it. And yes, it happened to it was so vacant and been vacant for so long. It had Merry Christmas spray painted across the front. Somebody in unit number 4, if I remember right, it had this old orange kind of shag carpet, and there was a chalked outline of a body in unit 4. And it was real enough that I was like, is this a joke? Is there like a camera here? Or, I don't, to this day, I don't know if it really was or not, but it looked ugly enough, and it was bad enough that it could have been. And so we fixed it up. I had to scrap by and get some money from some private investors from the local bank, but put the deal together and eventually was able to do kind of a refinance, and permanently, I still have it today, and lived in it for several years, got married. My wife moved into the unit number 2 with me, lived for free for a long time, and until I had a good base to then kind of move on from there. So your story is, we could go in a lot of different directions just based on your story, but the question that you and I probably get asked the most about is the current state of the market. We're here in March of 2021, and a lot of people talk about bubbles and things of that nature in real estate, and there's obviously some validity to that, but there is a lot of upward pressure, on particularly the residential side of real estate, which just makes it challenging. And so what you and I talk about before the show was about, becoming a deal maker in this market. So how do you convey that to potential investors when you're talking to them about the state of the market?
Yeah, I always try to borrow from people who are a lot smarter than me, borrow ideas. And one of them is Warren Buffett. And so if you look at he's one example of an investor who's been through a lot of ups and downs, and he's in the stock market a little bit more than we are in the real estate market, but it's very applicable. And one of his main premises that he uses as an investor is that trying to predict the market, trying to predict the future is like a fool's game. It's as smart as he is, he's brilliant. Very few of us are going to be able to understand finance and numbers and the markets like he is. And yet he still says that no one consistently can predict what's going to happen 6 months from now, 9 months from now. Now, that doesn't mean that we stick our head in the sand and say, wow, we're just going to ignore the fact that there's the market's changing and it's really competitive. Like, no, it's not that we ignore it. The distinction that I try to make for myself is that instead of trying to be a person who predicts the market, I'm a person who prepares for the market. And I look at it like I'm not a martial artist who does Aikido, but I've always respected like Aikido martial artists or karate. And, a lot of those that these people are very calm and balanced in the midst of a fight, like a martial, that's like a war fight. They're very calm and they're prepared for things to come in any direction. And so I would compare like a deal maker in real estate is someone who is prepared for all the bad things that could happen. So the market could crash, prices could go down. The financial market could change. There could be lots of foreclosures. But on the other hand, what's also possible? We could have another 5 or 10 year run because of things outside of our control where prices continue to go up, where interest rates stay low. It could be, instead of going up, it could just be flat. And so I guess my point is, and this is Warren Buffett's point, is none of us are really smart enough. It's kind of just entertainment to try to make predictions of what's going to happen for the next 6 to 12 months. But a smart investor prepares for all of those. And so a deal maker, kind of like playing, doing martial arts, you got to prepare your defense. So you got to make sure you're not vulnerable in case the market crashes, in case, do you have cash reserves? Do you have loans that are not that dangerous? Do you have fixed interest loans that can last through the next 5 or 10 years? Do you have, the cash reserves are really important. In 2008, when I was, my business partner and I were still young, newer investors, we bought a lot of properties. We made a lot of mistakes, but we were able to kind of get through those mistakes because we had long-term mortgages with decent interest rates that weren't kind of coming due, that we had to refinance them right in the middle of a recession. That was a big deal. We also had cash reserves. So we made mistakes, but we were able to overcome our mistakes because we set aside a lot of cash. We didn't live on the edge of our cash budget. And this is like 101 finance advice that people make. Hey, have 3 to 6 months of cash reserves set aside. Well, in your real estate business, or if you're an entrepreneur of any type, you should have the same thing. Like whatever your overhead is, whatever your payroll is, whatever your mortgage payments plus all your taxes, insurance, maintenance, and all that, you should have 3 to 6 months of cash set aside. And if you're living below that, you're living on the edge. Like if we do have a bubble, if we do have a crash, you're not being that Aikido, warrior who's prepared for anything. So I guess that's my main point is like play a little bit of defense, get your finances in order. That stuff's not sexy. It's not something that everybody likes to talk about. Whatever happens over the next 6 to 9 months. Now let's talk about offense. Let's talk about strategy for getting deals in a market that's really competitive. Let's talk about getting financing through creative sources, maybe that reduce your risk or lower your interest rate. Like there's all sorts of things we could talk about, but I think that paradigm of being a prepared person instead of a predicting person who's always scared about what's going to happen next, that's a totally different kind of mindset that I think the successful investors really try to take.
Yeah, and one undervalued principle I think of house hacking that I certainly never thought of until afterwards, and we hear over and over and over again is when you have, let's just say a side-by-side duplex, and have to consider 2 furnaces, 2 water heaters, 2 roofs, it most people, and I know for myself and the clients and people that I've helped house hack, they automatically start saving at a higher rate, and it's kind of that compounding, that the whole FI community gets over time, where you start to think about it more, you start to save at a higher rate. And so, yeah, I mean, that, I think a lot of people, especially in our community that listen to this podcast, they really get and understand a lot of that saving. And so, we really appreciate that aspect of it. But getting back to kind of the deal maker, like, if you were talking to a first-time house hacker right now specifically, what would you kind of be, preparing them for as far as being a deal maker?
I think financing is always key. And so like if you're a first-time homeowner, one of the best things about house hacking is that you have access to some of the best financing on the market. You can get the lowest down payments. You can get the lowest interest rates. So it's almost like being prepared in any market it's important to have your financing in order. But in a very competitive market, it's even more critical to be able to move quickly, to be able to have a solid source of down payment funds, whatever that down payment happens to be. Like the more prepared your financing is, the more competitive you will be in the market. And so I think that's like part one, financing. Part two is, and this is something I know having a good agent helps out with, is being able to analyze your market, but also analyze your deal and the numbers with confidence. It's really hard when things get emotional and it's competitive. It almost feels like an auction environment, and an auction is really dangerous for buyers. I've screwed up. One of the biggest mistakes I've made as an investor was back in 2007. I was just busy, and I went to a bankruptcy auction, which I'd never been to before. I didn't really understand how things worked. I didn't understand the contracts, and I got into a competitive bidding situation where I lost my cool, where I didn't go in there and remember my numbers and focus on what my fundamentals were. And I paid more than I was supposed to. That was, I still kick myself. Like, why did I do that? But auctions will do that to you. Environments like this will do that to you. They'll make you emotional, and you'll kind of get out of your cold calculating these are the numbers. And so I think if that's what it takes for you, and I know it does for me, having third party, having a team around me who I have to explain my deal to, who will help me run the numbers, who will help me look at the rent comps, who will help me look at the resale value, who will help me look at the analyzing the repairs costs on the property. Like, all of those things are challenges, but with a team around you to help you kind of be more confident in running the numbers, you can solve some of that kind of emotional ups and downs of a market. So, that's, I think, the financing, and I threw a lot out there at one time, but having a team around you to help you be more confident in your analysis of the deal and more calm and less emotional is a really big deal right now.
For sure. And you just went through several things, kind of transitioning a little bit to the course you got upcoming. And a few years ago, I read your book, Retire Early with Real Estate. And it was honestly, it's still to this day, one of my favorite books. I won't give it to anyone because it's so marked up. I got so many notes in that book. I've read it several times, but I was in the middle of a flip at that point, and I just decided I need to get into your course. And the thing that I love about your course, and you in specific, is how genuine you are and how thorough the course is. And so, when you broke down 4 different things right there, talking to potential first-time house hackers and first-time real estate investors. And your course in specific, it touches on each of those in depth, right. Understanding your market, understanding, the MSA at large, and then your area in specific, and coding properties as, you have an A through D, A, B, C, D grading for properties and areas, and really understanding that and being able to convey it to your team. And you break down your team, what you're looking for in a team. Obviously, I'm biased. But I really think finding that, 5% real estate agent, somebody that's at the top of their game that also really understands, probably ideally actually invests, which is not the norm. The normal real estate agent doesn't really invest themselves. Right. Finding that person plugs you into some of your teams, and you walk through all of that. And so kind of walk us through the course, what you're trying to convey to everyone out there, and the value that it brings.
Yeah, thank you. Really the core of the course is really the core of real estate investing. So this goes back to, what's a deal maker mean? Like, a deal maker has 5 kind of core skills that I have found to be really important for me, and then as I've taught other people to buy their next deal, have been important to them. So let's list the 5, because I think that'll help through the idea of what kind of skills you're building. Number 1 is analyzing your market. So you mentioned, some terms like MSA, which is called a metropolitan statistical area. You can think about it kind of like zooming out in Google Earth. Like, the farther out you get, there's some trends that you need to understand: population, demographics, economy, things like that. And then when you zoom in really closely on Google Maps, you want to see, like, neighborhood by neighborhood, which neighborhoods have benefits that you're looking for. So understanding and picking a target market is step number 1 of the course. Step number 2 is learning how to analyze the numbers, run the numbers. Real estate's a math game. That doesn't mean you have to be a math genius. Like, a lot of people I've worked with in the course have been really intimidated by math. And one thing I try to do is just break it down into something you could do on the back of an envelope. Seriously, like, if you can learn a few formulas and you can do some, like, adding and subtraction, maybe a little bit of algebra, you can, on the back of an envelope, figure out through looking at like 4 or 5 different formulas whether this deal makes sense or not. And the great thing about house hacking is one of the simpler, not that it's easy, but it's one of the simpler analysis, of real estate investing. You need to see, like, what's the price of the property, obviously, but then what kind of cash flow can you make so that you can get closer to living for free? So house hacking, how do you run the numbers? That's part 2. Part 3 is the financing that I mentioned earlier. There are so many sources of financing, and I sort of look at it like a toolbox. And when you're first starting, let's just get you with one tool. Let's just learn how to use a hammer. Let's learn how to use a screwdriver, And over time, as you become more of an expert real estate investor, you can start adding more and more tools in there, like private financing, creative financing, home equity lines of credit, hard money, lease options. There's so many different tools that are out there. And so just know that those tools are out there. But as an investor, you just need to learn one or two, get good at those, get pre-qualified. And that's part 3 of the course. Part 4 is building your team. And I've always been a sports player. I've always played football, basketball, soccer. So I've just always valued the people around me. And I just realized that there's an old quote from John Wooden, who was a Hall of Fame basketball coach, that said, making you an all-star is having an all-star team around you. I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said. Like, if you want to be a star, you've got to have great people around you. You can't do it all yourself. Even if you're a DIY person who fixes stuff yourself, that's fine. But real estate is still a team sport. So building a good team is what we do in part 4. And you've actually helped me out with this, is building some scripts. Like, what kind of questions do you ask a real estate agent? What kind of questions should you ask the property manager? You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel if you've never done that. So we kind of train you on talking to people. And then step number 5, which is one of my favorites, just because I think it's the most difficult, challenging part of the business for people, is how do you find deals? How do you actually, and this is so relevant right now in today's market, when things are competitive and everybody's bidding up properties, like I don't go there. Like I don't get into situations where I'm competing with 20 other people to buy a property. It's going to be really difficult to win in that situation. What you want to do is find properties that people aren't paying attention to, either in parts of town that people aren't paying attention to, or by looking off market and doing some marketing and some lead generation. And some of that could be low cost, by the way. If you want to spend more money on ads and, all sorts of different, you can reinvest money in marketing. But some of this is just getting out in the neighborhood, driving for dollars, getting referrals, calling for sale by owner signs. So I go through a list of things and actually give you 17 different campaigns that you can pick one or two of those, kind of like a cafeteria, and learn how to run the numbers. So all of that, those are the five kind of core skills. And I have found that I kind of create some milestones along the way. So it's like a map. Like, you look at a map and say, I need to do step 1, and don't get overwhelmed by all the other steps. Let's just do step 1. Then let's do step 2. Then let's do step 3. And we have a lot of accountability. We have a lot of group. I have TAs in the course. Bradley was one of those. So I'm proud to just introduce all the people in the course to people who've been successful. Like that, success leaves clues. And there are people like Bradley and other TAs in the course who are a few steps ahead of you, and you can watch how they've done that. And they can give you advice that's different from my advice sometimes, which is great. And so that community aspect, the milestones, the course, the fundamentals, I found to be a really productive way to get you unstuck. Like, if you're just kind of like, man, I just don't know what my next steps are. I got all the information. I'm just a little overwhelmed. Breaking it down into those basic step-by-step processes, and then having a community and kind of support and accountability. That's a good recipe for making progress down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And, with this podcast, we don't spend a whole lot of time promoting other people's work. I mean, that's not really, but for your course, it honestly, especially that back of the napkin analysis, for somebody like me, I am one of those that, math is not, especially analyzing deals. It's not something I like doing. It's not something I'm really good at. I'm very creative and I'm able to, that's where value add. And so not everyone's like me, but being able to quickly decide whether a deal has the potential or not was incredibly helpful for me. And you had, 6 different criteria for that. And it quickly allowed me to analyze deals at a high rate and then go into further depth down the road. But, what got me stuck in the wheel there for a while was trying to analyze deals, overanalyzing deals, and taking too much time. And so that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we all get there, right? Like, and I'm not opposed to spreadsheets. Like, I like spreadsheets. It's fun to get nerdy on that. But I found sometimes people, particularly people who get too much into the spreadsheets, will overanalyze everything, and that's difficult as a new investor. And I'll go back to Warren Buffett again, right? Warren Buffett says if he's buying $1 billion, like he's spending $10 billion on a business. So this is a whole nother level. But he says if he has to use a calculator or a computer to run the numbers on his $10 billion deals, it's not a good deal. Like, that's amazing to me. Like, Warren Buffett's stroking a check for $10 billion, but the reason that's the case is that you don't want to be like precisely right. You want to have a big gap. You want to have like a margin of safety. If you run the numbers with using 2 or 3 different formulas, if it's just so tight that you're just like, man, I don't know, what if I tweak this number? If you're having to tweak a bunch of numbers, it's not a good deal. Like, it should just kind of jump off the page at you. And if it's not, then move on to the next deal. I guess that's the point of the back of the envelope analysis. It's not that you shouldn't go into more depth and run the numbers even more in depth, but that first pass, when you're really running the numbers, that's the reason I emphasize that so much, is that you need to get good at the basic formulas like you have, Bradley, and then you'll increase your confidence. And you can always go get some other people to help you look at it too, which I encourage you to do. But it's just a good skill set to have to make confident offers out there.
What's up, everybody? Let's take a quick minute and talk about Rent Ready. Are you new to house hacking and wondering how you find tenants and collect rent, especially while trying to maintain professional boundaries and a shared living space? Rent Ready can help you manage your house hack setup. For less than $9 a month, you can do it all. Fill rooms quickly with sites like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist with a free professionally designed listing page. Find high-quality tenants with TransUnion certified background checks, electronically send, signed, and store leases, and collect rent for the entire lease or set up month-to-month charges. For your tenants, they use Rent Ready's app to complete the application, sign their lease, and pay you rent. They can even submit maintenance requests from the app instead of knocking on your door. Even better, Rent Ready is unlimited, so you don't have to pay per unit or per tenant. Just one flat price, which puts more money in your pocket. And speaking of putting more money in your pocket, Rent Ready has given our listeners a discount to get 50% off any Rent Ready plan when you sign up using our special code SUCCESS at rentredy.com. That's RENTREDI.com using code SUCCESS for 50% off any Rent Ready plan. All right, let's get back to the episode.
And, that's the whole point of this particular episode is, we are in a weird time in the real estate market. We haven't really seen anything like this, pretty much throughout the country where we have this shortage of residential real estate driving the prices. And so being able to be, like you said, a deal finder, being able to be somebody that's adaptable and being able to be somebody that's decisive, it comes with having the knowledge and having the confidence. And so, your course gave me a ton of confidence, on top of just the information. There's accountability partners, which I thought was incredibly helpful for myself. I still from time to time stay in touch with the accountability partners I had 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was probably 4 years ago when I took the course. Yeah. And so it's a great community. Your slogan, which is right behind you, do what matters. It embodies what we're trying to do with this real estate investing, with becoming financially free. It's all about what's the end game, what actually matters in our life. And the course really embodies that whole persona. And so, I'm a huge fan of it for sure.
Well, thanks. And I feel like we all like being in classes, or we like learning in general. Like nobody's going out there saying, hey, this online course is what I've always aspired to do. But what we do want is to be around people who are kind of moving in the same direction as us. And we want to be around people who are aspiring to the similar things and accomplishing the things we want. And doing what matters is my slogan of my course, my podcast, my website. And it's really just it's what I aspire to, is that I want to continually in my life do more of what matters. And what are the things getting in the way of that? Like for a lot of us, doing what matters means spending more time with our kids. It means contributing to our community. It means being healthier personally. All these things have nothing to do with real estate. And real estate is fun too. Like I love doing real estate, but like the thing that gets in the way for a lot of us is money, and it's our finances. And so this course is really all about giving you a skill set called being a real estate deal maker, where you can own this. Like the rest of your life, you'll be better at finding deals, analyzing markets, building a team, running the numbers, getting all these things together. My goal is to build a kind of almost like a little mini franchise of real estate investing. You take this, you own it, you know it. You have a community of people to help support you, and you have me to support you. Like this is my vehicle. I don't do any one-on-one coaching anymore. I love doing it. It was a lot of fun. It's just not easy to do with my schedule, and it just wasn't the best way to help 100 people instead of helping 1 or 2. And as fun as that was, this is my way to do that. This is where I twice a year open up at a class, and I get every Thursday evening. There's office hours with me. Hey, for an hour or 2, we're chatting. Whatever questions on your mind. If there's something that's kind of blocking your progress, let's go there. There's no question that'll go unanswered inside the course. So that's kind of fun for me. Just from my selfish angle, is that I get to really know people, see what they're up to, learn what your struggles are, and let's adapt together. Is it 6 months from now, the advice we're giving might be different, right? So let's stick to it, and let's figure out what we need to adapt to, which marketing strategies, which analysis strategies are working 6 months from now. But they'll always come back to those 5 fundamentals. Those skills aren't changing. They've been working for, in business for hundreds of years. They'll still be working next year, the year after that. And that's really what it's all about.
For sure. So let's talk about that slogan, do what matters. The reason that you've resonated with me so much, back then and still today, is because for you, it's always been about something bigger. And I know your story, but I kind of want to go through your story beyond real estate. You had this epiphany, at some point, and I believe, if I remember correctly, is back, about 10 years ago, where you built up a huge portfolio, and all of a sudden you realized that being big wasn't necessarily the goal. And so you pivoted to being big, to having an effective portfolio, to then doing what matters. And so if you wouldn't mind, go talk about that, the psychology of getting to that point, and then talk about beyond that. I know you went down to South America, and just kind of talk about what matters to you and why you've done what you've done with real estate in FI.
Yeah. I mean, it was actually right before the last recession when it was kind of an eye opener. And the story was, my business partner and I were getting really good at being deal makers. We were finding lots of deals. We had private lenders who were loaning us money. And as a new investor, sometimes you have to model success of other people. You've got to copy other people. That's how we learn a language. That's how we learn to ride a bike, right? And so we went to seminars, we went to classes. There's a little less YouTube back then, which I wish they had more of that, less podcasts. But this is it's the same kind of concept. And we went to a class where this lady was really good at flipping houses. She was just buying like 50 houses a year. And we went to a couple other seminars, similar kind of story. Well, these people are just doing lots of volume, and they're just like, that's success. Like that real estate investor right there, they've got it going on. And we were just paying attention to their business model and said, we could do that. Like we could buy properties. Let's pay attention to how they find the deals, how they finance them, how they turn them. And, fast forward a couple of years later, in 2007, we had 33 closings, I think, that year. Some of those were flips. We flipped and made some big money on some deals. We wholesaled some deals. We bought some rental properties that we kept. For the most part, I'd say 85, 90% of the deals were really good deals. But we got so busy and we got a little bit sloppy by buying so many properties. It's hard to pay attention when things are moving and you're growing fast and you're trying to, there's so many details. And I compare it to like a train on the tracks, as long as all the machinery is working and everything, the train moves down the tracks. But if one little thing kind of goes off and some piece of machinery flies out of the engine of the train, it's easy to get off the tracks. And we had a little bit of that kind of scary moment in 2007. And I credit my business partner as being like the little bit wiser one at that point, which is great about having a team around you, right? Mm-hmm. And he was like, hey, we need to slow down a little bit. We need to think about this. And it was right about that time when he suggested that. I was also reading a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, right? It was kind of right after that came out. And the idea was, hey, like you don't have to be big and huge business. The point is to have a certain lifestyle. Point is to live a certain way. And we did this exercise, my business partner and I did, where we each wrote down the things like had nothing to do with business. What do you want to do in life that fulfills you? That what's fun for you? What do you enjoy? And I wrote down things. I actually got married that year, so my wife and I had some things on our list. But I wrote down things like playing basketball, pick up basketball in the middle of the day for 2 hours, or going on a hike in the woods in the middle of the day. Or, we didn't have kids at that point, but eventually picking up your kids from school and being there when they get home and they have that like 2 or 3 minutes of just their blah, 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 blah. This is what we did at school today. Like that 3 minutes when they get home is incredibly valuable. And for my wife and I, traveling, my wife's a Spanish teacher. And so we both love travel. I wanted to learn Spanish and become fluent in Spanish. I used to speak German in college. And so I just had a love of foreign languages and travel and other cultures. And so all of these things were on my list. And what I was amazed by, though, is like how little money some of those things actually cost. Yes, traveling costs money, but I could quantify it. Like I could go abroad to South America for 4 months at that point for like 15 grand. Like I could save it up. It's like buying a car, right? Save up the money. But what I couldn't do is get away from the schedule and the work and the flipping houses and all these meetings I had. And I said, well, wait a minute. Like something's not going on right here. I need to build a lifestyle where the doing what matters is first. That's the first priority. And then money and the business and this real estate investing thing serves that. It's the servant. It's not in charge. And I think a lot of us, myself included, get that backwards sometimes. We live to work instead of working to live. And so that was the aha moment, but it's not like you can unwind that overnight, right? We had the recession, we had all these things going on, but fast forward a little bit, I think we made some distinct changes in our business, a lot of what we've explained today, where by 2009, and right in the middle of the recession, my wife and I were able to take a 4-month mini retirement. We weren't yet at financial independence where we were completely comfortable stopping working, but we saved up enough money. The business was systematized enough that I could leave, and we went backpacking in Spain for 6 weeks. We went down to Peru, and I learned to speak Spanish in both those places, stayed with families down there, hiked at Machu Picchu up in the mountains of Peru. We went hiking in Patagonia and Argentina and Chile and southern, they're just kind of these big wide open vistas with national parks and penguins at the bottom of South America. I mean, it was just an unbelievable trip. And that for me was really helpful to see, because I'm kind of a go-getter. I know you're a go-getter, hustler too. For me, detaching myself from my life and having this opportunity for 4 months to just like press pause on your life and just do something different, it was really allowed me to it was a difficult time in some ways, like having to look inside yourself and say, all right, why am I doing this? Like you have a bunch of things you're doing that don't make sense. And so self-exploration, growth, those things are sometimes we get so busy, you just kind of forget about some of those, and also just health, walking, exercising, eating better. So coming back, I wasn't done yet, but that really like planted the seed for me that doing what matters is the center of all this. And so building a business around that. So from then on, fast forward, we had kids, and we ended up going on another trip in 2017 for a year and a half to Ecuador. And we took our kids this time, and they went to elementary schools there and local schools. They became fluent in Spanish. We fell in love with the Ecuadorian culture and the people there. Yes, work's great. Like I love work. I love contribution, but like building a financial way of life that allows you to have spaces of time to do whatever it is that matters to you. And that could be travel. That could be your kids. For me these days, like what I'm doing right now, I'm doing a lot of volunteering. For the last 5 years, I helped start a nonprofit in my town to work on some things that are really important to me in terms of walkability and biking around town and helping people have alternative forms of transportation. That might not matter to anybody else, but like that matters to me and my wife. And so I have time to spend it. I'm doing like 30 hours a week, helping to build this and using a lot of my real estate skills to do something that I get no money for, but it's really important to my community. And that to me is what I want to encourage everybody else to do. Not overnight maybe, but if you can house hack, you can reduce your expenses, you can save up some money, you can then buy another rental property. It doesn't take a lot. You could have 4 or 5 properties in many cases and make enough money and have enough freedom to have flexibility and to do things completely different than you did before that.
And if you wouldn't mind, I love how you articulate the peaks and valleys. I think you might call them plateaus, of kind of the climb to financial freedom, because the majority of people, I would say, listening to this podcast, Drew and I aren't their first dive into maybe financial freedom or real estate, and so they have this goal of maybe retiring early, which your book centers around. I'm a huge advocate for your book, by the way. If anyone's listening and really wants to have a roadmap to retire early with real estate, which is the title of the book, I mean, it's a fantastic book. But a lot of people have that goal, but I see in my own life too, we tend to burn ourselves out at both ends of the stick. Yeah. And you have a different model for that, and you've shown us that throughout your career. Talk about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. It was when we were in Peru, my wife and I, before we had kids, and we went to this canyon called the Colca Canyon. It's kind of like the Grand Canyon, not quite as big, but really deep. And we were kind of macho. Hey, we were walking all the time. I was more macho than my wife. I'll admit that. And that we went down and we walked all the way down to the bottom of this canyon. And then we spent some time there and let's go back up. Like we needed to be back to catch a bus the next day. And so we walked all the way back up. We were pushing it. Like we were climbing this essentially a mountain, a canyon, and we pushed it really hard. And by the time I got back about halfway up the mountain, we didn't eat a good lunch. We pushed it hard. We were going. We're young, we're healthy, but I almost passed out about halfway up this climb, to the point where I was leaning on the side of this cliff, and my wife was really worried. I was just going to pass out, and it was getting dark outside. And ultimately I stumbled back into this town, but it was a really humbling experience. And it also taught me something about the way you actually climb difficult mountains or difficult paths. And it's very similar to financial independence and real estate investing, in that I'm very susceptible to just go, push through it. You're hurting a little, let's just keep going. As opposed to, maybe you should like pace yourself a little bit, because this is a long, like ultra marathon. Financial independence, real estate investing, some of these goals we have are up there at the top of the mountain, and like we should shoot for those. Those are great. But you can get there in increments. That's the beautiful thing. Even if you're like, man, financial independence is so far off in my life, there are a bunch of little plateaus along the way that you can reach. For example, like what if you were trying to get a couple rental properties, like you got a house hack and then maybe one other rental property over the next few years. And what if that generated an extra $500 per month in cash flow for you? That would be a plateau. Like you should celebrate that. You should pat yourself on the back, because you could take a break. You could, maybe it's a week or two. Maybe it's a vacation that you couldn't take before. Maybe it's just the fact that you have a little bit more financial stability in your life. Like that is a plateau. Like you should celebrate that. And there are a bunch of plateaus like that along the way. And it's kind of like, you got to stop to smell the roses, right? You should always also enjoy it. Like this isn't like a grind that you just keep on going for 20 years and finally you're happy. Like, no, like you got to be happy now. Like if you want to be happy at the top of the mountain, you got to be working on yourself now. And having a bunch of money and having all the wealth is easy. I know life will be easier when you have more money, but you got to start working and enjoying life as you go. Enjoy the process. It's easy to say, harder to do, right? But some of these plateaus of just kind of patting yourself on the back, taking a break, enjoying life, and then getting back to the climb again, it was so helpful for me. And it's something I needed. Like my wife was a big reminder of this, like, Chad, take a break, enjoy this thing. Maybe it's just a weekend. Maybe it's a 1 week vacation. Detach yourself from the grind. And the ironic thing is when you get back on the climb, you're even better. Like you will probably get there faster by taking these breaks, taking these plateaus, and you'll enjoy the process as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny how good they are at reminding us of that, aren't they?
Yes.
So I wanted to talk to that first, because you're also very instrumental in the financial independent movement, kind of the FIRE, if people are familiar with the financial independent retire early community. So it's not just about real estate for you. You're obviously incredibly instrumental. You wrote a great book. You got a great course. But you talk also a lot about, the kind of whole concept of retiring early. It doesn't just have to be about real estate. Talk to us a little bit about, what kind of your portfolio looks like, how you think about the FI movement, how you help people kind of, determine their FIRE number, like what do they need per month? What should that look like? Mixed with this concept of doing what matters and taking these peaks and plateaus, just walk through that, because I know you think about it a lot.
Yeah, I think I'll start with that last part about your financial independence number. So most people, when they get into this concept of financial independence or retiring early, the idea is just freedom. It's autonomy. It's control over your life, whatever that looks like for you. Having more control and freedom to do what matters. That's like the pinnacle. That's what you're trying to get to. But how do you quantify that? That's one of the challenges. And there's camps, and there's probably a lot more camps, but there's two that I know of that I like to talk about in the financial independence world. And there's one that are more geared towards stocks, bonds, kind of those kind of more paper assets. And those are great. Like I'm a fan of diversification and owning index funds. Like in my stock, my retirement account and my wife's retirement account, we own almost all index funds. We do have some self-directed real estate stuff too. But the point is, like, how do you calculate your number when you own those kind of properties? And there's something, this is a long story, but like there's something called the 4% rule, which a lot of people kind of roughly try to use as a goal. And what that means is that if you have a portfolio, you can conservatively, take about 4% of that portfolio per year, plus or minus. Some people use 3%, some people use 4.5%. There's a whole discussion about that, but there's some percentage that you want to take. And it's a pretty small number of your overall net worth in order for it not to go away. Like you want it to last you, especially if you're an early retiree. And so you can't take out big chunks. You got to take out a smaller percentage. Now, what is that percentage? The 4% rule is like kind of what some people use. With real estate, I say the other camp of financial independence is a little bit different because we're more income oriented. And so the approach that I take is basically stacking up income. And you start from the end and you say, well, how much income would I need to pay for my lifestyle? So if you don't know that number, this would be a good exercise for you to do over the next couple months. Just track everything you're spending, either through like an app like Mint, or you can just track it on a spreadsheet, or you can just write it down if that's your thing. But you just pay attention to how much you're spending, understand how much is going in and out every month, and then kind of extrapolate that to a year. And then if you want to be real conservative, you'll round up. If that's $60,000 a year that you're spending, but you want to make sure you have enough to have a cushion, maybe that's $70,000 or $80,000. Like, just pick a number. I'm not as worried about what the number is. Just make sure that's a good number for you. But then you start working it backwards and say, how many rental properties that are paid off free and clear would it take to pay for my lifestyle at $60,000 or $80,000? And so it's really a matter of kind of stacking up cash flows. If each property, when it's paid off, produces $500 or $1,000, let's say it's $1,000, then in your number was $5,000 per month. Well, 5,000 divided by $1,000 is 5 properties, right? So if you had 5 paid off properties that net produce $1,000, then you could have financial independence with 5 properties. If you make $500 per month, you're going to need twice as many. You need 10 properties. But the point is, like, the math really simple. Like, if rewind that if you're listening to this and the math kind of was just a little bit off, but it's an addition problem and a subtraction problem instead of like really complicated math. And your job as a person early in your financial independence career is to buy properties that eventually can grow enough to produce that income down the road. That's your goal. You don't have to have that income today. Necessarily. You might have a property that you bought that has a $30,000 equity, and you want to sell that equity and buy another property in order to produce the cash flow. So there's a lot of different ways, and I'll talk about that in the book. There's kind of different paths up the mountain, depending on your market, depending on what's going on in the market right now with you. But ultimately, the goal is to have these income properties that pay for your lifestyle, that with a minimal amount of effort from you. I'm not saying no effort. There's no such thing as completely passive. But like when I was in Ecuador for a year and a half, I spent about an hour, sometimes 30 minutes every Thursday, looking over some books, paying some bills. It was all virtual on the computer because I had a team back at home who were doing most of the details. That's what we're talking about. That's how you translate rental properties into numbers, into your financial freedom, is that you build some systems and a team and some properties that can pay your bills. So that, I think that's part of your question, right, Bradley? Was like, how do you accomplish that financial independence number?
Yeah. How do you think about, just the FI community getting there, and then also bringing in that element of peaks and plateaus to try to get to a number at, say, an early age that a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are probably aspiring to leave that job, become, job autonomous to a certain degree. And I know that's already happening a little bit with people working from home and such. And it's really top of mind for people now, maybe stepping back and reevaluating their job. So I just kind of the thought process with it.
Yeah. And so what I just explained is probably the core. Like, you want to have assets that produce income, right? Like, that's the gold standard. But there's a lot of steps in between there that you can add. And this is what I've been doing. And I think this is what you're doing too, Bradley, is that, like, I built a lot of other skills that produced income. So, like, I have my real estate license. It's on dormant status now, but I feel pretty confident because that's the skill set I have to go out and evaluate the market, help people buy properties. I could do that. I feel pretty confident that in 6 months, 12 months, I could have a 6-figure business being a real estate agent. So that doesn't seem like that's a financial independence skill necessarily, because that's a job. But I think people underestimate entrepreneurship and having businesses as kind of an additional path to financial security and financial freedom. And it has certainly been that for me. Like, I have my rental properties, but I could also be a property manager. I could also be a bookkeeper. I do bookkeeping. Like, my CPA is always like, you have great books. You could do other people's books. I was like, I don't want to, but I could. Yes. Yeah. I could be a real estate agent. And so these are all real estate skills, but some of you out there might have other skills. Like, and so I think outside the box. Like, the way the economy is right now, being a employee who just, stays with one company for the next 20, 30, 40 years, like, that's not normal. Like, if you can do that, great. But most of us are going to have to be, Bradley Incorporated, Chad Incorporated. Like, we're going to have to start our own thing, and we have to be entrepreneurs. And the sooner you start doing that, even if it's just a little small thing, like an Etsy store on the side, or, going to a local farmer's market on Saturdays and selling your jewelry, or if it's, becoming a real estate agent on the side and doing a little bit of that, or, this is where you can find the thing that your skill set is built for.
Yeah.
Not necessarily your passion. Like find your skill set and then go find that skill set and build a little business around it. That's kind of a second level of financial independence that I think is really important.
Yeah. And that's why, that's why we're so passionate about this concept. And I know you are too. And it's because, it is incredibly challenging once you become an entrepreneur to get the favorable lending that house hackers get, that primary lenders get. It's especially in the age of COVID, entrepreneurs are having a difficult time. And so, utilizing that, that great lending, 30-year fixed rate and taking care of that home expense allows you to then become entrepreneurial. And we see it over and over and over. And we see it in other ways too, not necessarily entrepreneurial, but my co-host Drew, he's a professional bowler. And so when I had met him, he was dead broke. He was one of the top bowlers in the country, but he was dead broke. And I'm just like, listen, if you went and decided to go get a duplex, you could eliminate your rent that you're paying, and then you could go bowl some more. And so we hear it over and over, people in arts and things like that. And so we get the question, kind of formulating kind of what we're talking about this whole podcast. We get the question over and over again, what's the economy going to do? What's tomorrow going to look like? That's what everyone's always talking about, no matter what the market's like. I mean, you went through 2008. People, from my understanding, thought the real estate would never rebound during that time. That was kind of the prevailing wisdom that real estate was never going to. So it's always that way. And the point of this whole conversation is learning and getting a solid education, because no matter what happens tomorrow, it's going to change. There's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be people that tell you it's too hot or it's too cold to get into real estate. It's not a good time now. Wait till tomorrow. That's always what's going to happen. And so getting that education, because I tell you what, right before I went through your course, I was flipping houses, and the prevailing wisdom back then, as silly as it sounds now, was that the economy was going to crash. We're coming up to kind of an election cycle, and it was just people like Kiyosaki and Peter Schiff's of the world were screaming the real estate market was going to crash, and I was losing sleep. Like I was in the middle of these flips, like losing sleep, like I'm going to be holding the bag. And now in retrospect, it's like not that their warnings are wrong, and they're still talking about a lot of the same thing. It's just that it's more about being a deal maker, like you said, and being adaptable. Because somebody always is going to talk about, not being in the right time. And it's all about that education. I know that was long-winded, but I just kind of want to share that story.
No, well said. I think that demonstrates it perfectly, Bradley, that it's not that predictions don't sometimes come right. It's just when we look back in the past, the people who predicted it right, we kind of put up on a pedestal. And then the 99% of people who got it dead wrong, like we just ignore that, right? And so I'm not saying it's not entertaining. Like, go watch the YouTube video of somebody predicting the 2021 crash and all that stuff. Like that's cool, but like don't call that investing. Like what we are talking about is building the number one investment you have, which is your own mind and your 100%. Own skill set, and then also your relationships. Like, man, I love how you emphasize team, because the best thing, in addition to just having this knowledge in my head and these skill sets, the number one thing that kept me out of trouble and that gave me the most advantages was relationships with other people. I mean, it was just bar none, was the hands down thing that got me through 2007, 8, and 9. This made me profit over the long run. And so like, if you focus on those two things, learning and becoming good at what you do, becoming a craftsperson, like becoming the best real estate investor you can be, and then building rock solid, trustworthy, adding value relationships with other people, like that's not a gimmick. Like that is not going away anywhere. It'll work today. It'll work 2022. It'll work in 2032. And we will adapt to all the different tactics in between. Those are important, but I think it's worth, we both said that over and over again, but I think follow models, business models, life models that aren't the fly by night kind of latest thing. Instead, try to kind of dig deep, a little bit deeper, find the things that you can build that are not going anywhere. The foundation of a house, the foundation of a business, the foundation of financial independence, and then build that. And I think we'll all be much better off by doing that.
For sure. Let's briefly touch on that, because, I don't think I actually ever quantified or ever thought about how much football had translated to, sort of what I do. But we've had a couple of former NHL players that house hacked. We had a former NFL player that house hacked in 3 cities. And during those conversations, we end up starting talking about sort of what we learned in sports, and some of them were a little bit different. But, the whole concept of it was always easy for me to develop a team. Like I instinctively knew that that I needed somebody, I needed team members. And so that was always a strength of mine. But I've come to realize that it isn't everyone else's skill set. And it's probably come from what we learned in real estate. Talk a little bit about that and, kind of how important that is and how you learned that, because a lot of people probably don't know that you almost got drafted yourself.
Yeah, I was a college football player. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I got a scholarship. I was a middle linebacker in football. And so for those who don't know much about football, it's kind of like the quarterback of the defense. You're right in the middle of everything. And I think I realized from my junior to my senior year of college one time that how important it is. Like every year, the people around you make you look good. I had a really good junior year. My senior year, we were a little bit younger. I was having to be more of a leader. We didn't have quite as good of a year. And I felt like I was prepared in both years. Like I felt like I worked hard both years, but like the stats totally changed based on the dynamic of the people around me. And so like to your point, like I think if we focus on, yes, your own skills, yes, like in football, you got to get in shape, you got to get strong, you got to do all these things. But man, you're capped at how good your team is. Like there's no doubt about it. And so both of those, you need to work on both of those. But I think the team might be to some extent even more critical over the long run. Like, I've always heard this quote. I think it was a Jim Rohn quote, who's a personal development speaker, who said, you are basically the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And when I look back if you look at your money, you look at your happiness, you look at your, your just energy in life and all those things, it's kind of comes true, so I think if we focus on that and make that a deliberate strategy, not that you don't serve and help people who, are in trouble or have problems, but like in order to help and serve people, like you've got to take care of yourself first. Like you've got to surround yourself with people who elevate your game. And once you do that, now you've got a lot more to give. And I think that's been a big lesson for me is that you've got to put your own oxygen mask on. You've got to build your inner circle of people who are your ride or die people, like people who you really trust and who are with you. And once you do that, man, you have a lot to give other people. And that's what it's all about, giving and serving people. But I see a lot of people who are trying to serve financially and they're trying to serve the world. And back to your point about artists and bowling and all that stuff, like, yet they can't pay their bills. Like, that's a little bit backwards. Like let's take care of our bills. Let's get the basics. Let's do this house hack. Let's get a little bit of money coming in. Let's get a skill set of a job that we can spend 10 hours a week on making some money so that we can do our art. We can do our service. We can do the thing we're passionate about. And I think that order is really important.
Yeah. And, so for those out there that are sort of where I was, 5-6 years ago, where you've heard, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around most, but it was whenever I heard that, I'm like, I understood the concept. It was challenging for me to provide the value to be around some of those other people that I wanted to be around. And what I've learned, or you're in, kind of like a big corporation like I am, that's kind of to a certain extent soul sucking, everyone in there, it has, you just, every time you go in there, there's just a negative energy at your job and things of that nature. And my job is fantastic. It provides a lot of things, but the environment is tough. And I know there are a lot of people that express the same, kind of, feelings. And that's what something like this course that Chad is provides, because, you have, you pair up these accountability partners that throughout the life of this course, you're going to interact with, you develop a friendship with, and you may be states away. The accountability that I had when I went through your course, they were in South Carolina. I'm in, Michigan. And so, but we developed this friendship and I get to be associated with you. You're in my ear all the time. Right. And like you develop, those people become those people speaking in your ear and giving you that positive, aspect to it that you're probably lacking at your job. Maybe you haven't done a deal yet. So it's tough to, start a team, it's tough to, get a lawyer in your court when you don't have anything, it takes time to build some of that. This is what this is, and I just can't say enough about this course, what you provide. I mean, the extras, I had a list, like you have a lifetime access to Find Your Focus, the Real Estate Deal Finder, the rental property analysis, creative financing, the contract to close, fix and flip for cash. And then there are also a couple of books by Jay Scott, the book on estimating rehab costs, the book on flipping houses, just so much value tied into this. And for those that are trying to actually, instead of predict markets, become a deal maker, instead of, worrying about what's going on, actually know the ins and outs so that no matter what tomorrow brings, whether the market, continues its ascent or it drops, you're prepared and you kind of build that, the reputation as being somebody in real estate. Because, if the market does tank, it's going to be tough to, tough to get financing, B, tough to get private money if you don't have that reputation as somebody that's in real estate and really understands it. So, so definitely, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, talking to people like you who've been through the course and who demonstrate the concepts, it really makes me feel good because it's bigger than just me. These are concepts that I've learned from other people, from my mentors. And I think what you're getting at though, is that at some point in your career, like not everybody needs to go through a course. Like let's just put it like that. Like not everybody, some people just absorb it. They have a parent figure or like a mentor who like shows them every single step of what to do. Like if that's the case, like great, like good for you. Like that's awesome. And some people just kind of luck into they learn how to do it. But for a lot of us though, like the reason we go to school, the reason some of us go to technical college or we go to actual university or something is because we got to build our skill set up. Right. And so that's really what this is all about. And I know you're going to have some links to it, I believe, in the course, in the show notes. But like, I would just say like, if that's interesting to you, like that, it's an honor for me to be able to work with people, like getting to know Bradley, getting to know other people in the course. Like this is it's a long-term commitment on my part. Like this is just doing what matters for me. Like I could spend a lot more time in my real estate investing business and build a lot more wealth syndicating and working with like 10 rich people and go buy a bunch of properties. But like, I really love being a teacher. I really love the fact that there are people who are just starting and that maybe a little bit of wisdom that I've gained from some of my hard knocks could help you buy a property or two and help your financial independence trajectory change and your family do better. Like getting letters, like Bradley wrote me an email after he read the book that was just really complimentary. And like, that's my fuel. That's why I do this. And so I think it's important to know people's motivations. When there's all sorts of people out there, like my motivation is that I get a kick and I get a high out of people making progress. And I would love to see, 5 years from now, if I'm still teaching, that I could reach out to and hear from hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people who've taken some of this information. They bought 4 or 5 properties or 2 properties. They are now house hacking. They're now doing all that. Like that is a huge reward. And that's just an awesome feeling to know that you could do that. And I think this is the blueprint. This is my best effort at giving you some support and a blueprint to help you make this kind of close that gap between wherever you are right now to actually doing more deals come what may, come a down market, come an up market. We're trying to be flexible, like we talked about at the beginning, to give you that kind of flexible skill set that you can use over and over again.
For sure. So you have 3 free webinars. The March 9th, I believe, is the first one. And if I'm not mistaken, the 11th and the 15th, or maybe the 12th and the 15th.
Right. Yeah. There's a Tuesday, Thursday. So the March 9th, March 11th, those will be I'm teaching some free courses, essentially free webinar trainings, so that you can kind of see what it's all about. And whether you buy the course or not, like I would encourage you to come to these free trainings, because I'm going to be giving you all I got for an hour, and then I'll stick around for another hour to answer questions. And it's going to be about this topic that we've talked about today. But in the first call, I'm going to go in specifically into more depth on those 5 skills that I talked about. Like, what are these skills that you need to have as a real estate deal maker? I'm going to give you some examples of how you can put those together. And so just kind of laying out what it means to be a real estate deal maker and teach you how to do that. That's call number 1. Call number 2 is going to go a deep dive on one of those specific skills. We're going to talk about analyzing your market. And that's number 1 of the course for a reason. Like, I find that if you don't take care of that, it's kind of hard to figure out how to analyze the deals, how to get the money, how to build your team, because you don't even know where you're investing at, right? So we're going to go a deep dive on analyzing your market, whether it's the market you already live in, or if you're going to invest long distance, how do you pick a market? So that's going to be my call number 2. And then call number 3 is all going to be all about the next steps. So what are the milestones that, if wherever you are on your journey, I'm going to help you navigate and say, this is the next step. this is the next step. This is the next step. That's a kind of a requisite for me. Anytime I teach a class, I can't leave it with a pie in the sky idea. Like, we got to get practical. We got to get super, super practical. What's the next step and the next step? And so that's the third call that you'll get from me, is like, what are the next steps for you? What do you need to be doing right now? Out of all this information out there, we'll do that. And then if you like all of that, and if you want to have somebody help you with those next steps, that's where the course comes in. And I would be honored to have you join me there. The course opens March 15th of the spring. But even if you're listening to this later, I open it twice per year. So I open it for a week in March, open it for a week in September. And so those are the 2 times a year when you can get in the course. And after that, I close it just so I can focus on the students and concentrate on you and help you it's typically a 10 to 11 week process where it's very intense during the course. We take a little bit lighter, still have office hours and things during the summers and during the other times in between. But you can think about it, it's a continuous course that you can always go back to over and over and over again. And a lot of people do. And then, I invite TAs back like Bradley and some other people. So it's a kind of ongoing, and you invest once and then you have an ongoing community and lessons that you can keep going back to.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, I'll be in there. So for anyone, in the house hacking community, I'll be there. Of course, I'll give you my number. We'll be in contact as well, kind of in this aspect, but just the whole concept, getting a broader sense of real estate. I'll give a quick story. Back 4 years ago when I was in here, I was in the middle of a property. I had just read the book. I had all my money into this deal. I didn't really have the money to buy the course, but I just knew through your, how genuine of a person you are, how much that book touched me. I knew that I needed to get a step-by-step guide of real estate if I actually wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so fortunately, you had a 3-payment plan back then, and it was literally the only way I could buy this course. But from my understanding now, you have a 3-payment plan and a 12-payment plan for those that need it. So I just genuinely enjoy you as a person, your message, the whole do what matters concept, but then how thorough you are. And so, like you said, not everyone needs a course, but for those that are searching for answers, that are wondering what's going on in the world of real estate and really want to know that they know real estate and have that personal education to be able to continue a long-term investing mindset, this course, in my opinion, and I've looked at a bunch, I've been in a bunch, this one is by far my favorite. I think the one that provides the most value.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing with everybody today and for just being who you are as well. I mean, it's really cool to see all the people you're touching with your podcast and your impact and as a realtor. I mean, it's just, this is really cool to see the network of people that we have together and that can make a difference for a lot of people. This is a fun sport of real estate investing, and house hacking in particular is a passion of mine as well. I feel like it's one of the best ways to get in the business. And I still house hack to this day. Like, I have a basement apartment that I do Airbnb on game day. We have a football team, big football team at Clemson where I live. And so people pay money to come for football games during non-coronavirus. So I'm a house hacker through and through, and appreciate everything you do, Bradley.
Yeah, for sure. So before we set off here, besides real estate, doing what matters, what's kind of something on the horizon for you that matters to you going forward?
I can't wait to travel again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to be kind of fun. I think we're doing a lot of camping, actually, my daughters and I and my wife. So we're kind of into that. We're into the outdoors. We're into riding bikes. We're into exercising. We've been walking with our kids to school every day. And it was kind of a big, what do you call it? Just a highlight for me when my kids were like, Dad, we don't want to ride the bus anymore. We want to walk home from school. And we're like 1.25 miles from the school. Nice. And I was like, man, you have some failures as a parent along the way, but I was like, success. Like, we've brainwashed them sufficiently that they actually walking from school. So I guess what matters, hanging out, spending time with them. And then I mentioned the nonprofit earlier. I'm doing a lot of work. Just it's a nonprofit group that's building trails, and I'm trying to build our group, our nonprofit is building a network of walking trails and biking trails. And what happens in a lot of small towns and really big cities too, is that everything was built around automobiles from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And yet if you wanted to walk a quarter mile to the park with your kid, like you get run over by a truck. Yeah. And so it seems like a real kind of practical thing, but it's real important to have like good crosswalks and sidewalks and bike lanes. And so that's been a passion of mine that I spent a ton of time on as well.
100%. Well, Chad, I genuinely appreciate you coming on, provide a ton of value to me personally. For those that have not listened to episode 39, we dug into kind of your personal story. We talked a lot about the ins and outs, but I really wanted to have you on to talk about this course because it's meant a lot to me personally. I know it'll provide a ton of value to anyone that is kind of searching for that because everyone's at different stages. And perhaps, like you said, some people have, the people in their corner where they don't need a course, or maybe people are just searching and they're not quite ready for that. But I know there's a broad, there are quite a few people listening to this right now that are searching for that next step. And, there are a lot of people that have courses, but I don't know anyone that provides the value that you do and has the message that you do as well. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing that.
Thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it. And thank you to all the listeners for being here today. It means a lot as well. So hope to see you soon.
All right, Chad. Have a great day.
You too.